Good morning and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be in Hebrews chapters 9 and 10. Last week we did an introduction to these two chapters and kind of an overview, talking about the fact that the author is comparing the new covenant worship to the old covenant worship and what the differences are. The major difference that you might think of is that there is no sacrifices in the new covenant worship. You might also recognize the fact that some of the traditions, the regulations, the location, those are some of the things that changed from the old law to the new law. But why? What was the purpose in it? As a matter of fact, what was the purpose in the first law, the first covenant? Why did God create that? These are some of the questions that we would like to look at today and hopefully answer for you. So starting with that, if you were to try to imagine, why would God have created the first covenant? We know that reading in Hebrews chapter 9, we can see that the author here recognizes the old covenant was flawed. Let's look at chapter 9 and verse 9 of Hebrews, and it says, "This is an illustration for the present time, indicating that the gifts and sacrifices being offered were not able to clear the conscience of the worshiper. They are only a matter of food and drink and various ceremonial washings, external regulations, applying until the time of the new order." So you can see that they were imperfect. They were not able to accomplish what they were set out to do. In verse 11, he continues, "When Christ came as high priest of the good things that are already here, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle that is not man-made. That is to say, not a part of this creation. He did not enter by means of blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once and for all by his own blood, having obtained eternal redemption." So we see two more things. He did not bring worship into a human or a man-made sanctuary or tabernacle, but rather he entered through heaven, the ultimate and final place. He also mentions the fact that all of the sacrifices of the old were not able to bring in that relationship with God, but rather this new covenant through Jesus Christ, he became that perfect sacrifice. Again, in verse 13 of chapter 9, "The blood of goats and bulls and ashes of the heifers sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean sanctify them so that they are outwardly clean. How much more then will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our conscience from the acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God?" Once again, this internal cleansing, not just the external, not just the outward signs, but the inward change. And then in verse 15, he says, "For this reason, Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, now that he has died as a ransom to set us free from the sins committed under the first covenant." So all of this, including eternity, is dependent on this new covenant. The old covenant was not able to do or accomplish all of these things. So why did God create it in the first place? When you think about the things that happen in the Old Testament, when you read through the Old Testament, you see a lot of different examples of how God interacted with his people, what he did for them, how he led them, how much he loved them, what his desires were for them. All of these lessons that we've learned through the Old Testament are part of what I believe the purpose of the Old Covenant was. I'd like to look at that just a little bit more. If we compare, for instance, Solomon. Solomon was known to be the wisest man. So what did he do? How did his life influence us? How did it help or hurt us in the realization of what God intended for us? Well, if we look at Ecclesiastes and chapter 12, this is what the author says. So Solomon says, "Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless." Whenever you think of Solomon and you think about all of the things that he did throughout his life, I believe this was something that God set up for us to see and understand that the things of this world cannot bring us any kind of joy, happiness that would be lasting. He had more wives than anybody else recorded in the Bible. He had concubines. He had beautiful gardens and a huge palace. He had all of the money that you could ever dream of. He had the wisdom and the knowledge. He even talked about how many books that he had written and how much things that he had done and accomplished in his life. All of these things and so much more he had and he had experienced through his life. So you ask, why would God have done this? Why would he have allowed Solomon to have done and accomplished and managed all the things that he did? Well, if you look at, again, in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, in verses 13 and 14, it says, "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." Solomon pondered everything that the world had to offer and went down every possible path, trying to find out what would bring joy and happiness to mankind. And when it all came to the end, what the answer is? Fear God and obey his commandments. If you want true happiness, that's what the answer is. Throughout the Old Testament, there are example after example after example of people who chose to follow God and the blessings they received. Not necessarily always blessings of things of this earth, but the blessings that they received in the fellowship with God, the peace that they had, whatever it might be. But God answered prayers. God worked with his people. He showed his love for his people. And time again, these examples are given us. So then again, why did God even create man to begin with? From the very beginning of the Old Testament, in Genesis 1, we see that God created a beautiful existence, this earth that we live in, and everything on it. All of the animals, all the fish, all of the birds, everything that he created was created perfectly in beauty. And he did that for man. And man himself, he created, I believe, to have a relationship with God, so that he could commune with man and man commune with God. If that was the purpose of God's creation, we can see that in Genesis 1, when Adam and Eve are created and placed in a garden. And in this garden, everything is perfect. God says to them, do whatever you want. Take care of the animals. See to it that things are taken care of, but it's yours. Do what you want with it. Basically, he's just setting him in this garden, and he walks with them in this garden. He communes with them. He is together with his creation. But then there's one thing. The only thing I ask is don't eat of this one tree, the tree of knowledge. Everything else you can eat of. Anything else you can share. But this one thing, reserve. Don't touch it. Don't eat from it. So God gives him this beautiful place and exists with him there. But as we all know, the serpent, Satan, tempts Eve, and she eats of this apple or fruit. And in doing so, Adam also eats of it, and they are separated from God. they are no longer allowed to go into the garden because they would eat of the tree of life and live forever. And so God expels them from the garden. And for the first time in creation, God is not able to fellowship with man as he had set out to do. His design, his desire. So throughout the Old Testament, throughout all of the books of the Old Covenant, we see something that God is trying to do. He's trying to show them that there is no possible way in humankind, by our own power, can we earn back the right to live with God, to exist with God. Because of sin, we are separated from God. We are no longer able to be with him. And then comes the New Testament, the New Covenant. And God once again establishes the ability for us to commune with him, to be part of it. So I'd like to look quickly at Exodus chapter 24. When we look at the old law, the old covenant, it takes up the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those 5 books are called the books of law. And the reason being is most of it is taken up by rules and regulations. In chapter 24, there's something that happens when Moses is before the people and talking to them about God and how God desires them to follow his will. And this is what happens. In Exodus chapter 24 and verse 1, then he said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance. But Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with you. When Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice, everything the Lord has said, we will do. Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrifices, young bulls of fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in the bowls, and the other half sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant, and he read it to the people. They responded, we will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey. Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, this is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all of these words. Now listen to this part. Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of sapphire, clear as the sky itself. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate, and they drank. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commands that I have written for your instruction. The reason I believe this was recorded for us is that I believe God wanted us to see that his desire was still to have communion with man, to have fellowship with us, to enjoy the ability to walk with man once again. So he set this up and let the 70 elders, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, as well as himself, see all of these things and see God, and they did not die. Why would he do that? I believe it's for the purpose of showing us that it's still his desire to have communion and to fellowship with man. So that brings us back to Hebrews chapters 9 and 10. What's the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant. In the old covenant, we had imperfect structures. We had imperfect people. We had imperfect sacrifices. And we had imperfect solutions to restoring man to God. Why would he have done all of these things? Just like he offered Solomon the opportunity to have wisdom and riches beyond compare. Why? So that we could see that happiness and joy does not come from the things of this world. Likewise, the old covenant, with all of its laws and regulations, were established so that we could see that man is unable to restore a relationship with God because of how good we are, or the things that we do, the deeds that we accomplish, or how many things that we possibly might come up with that could restore that relationship with God. Nothing in our power is able to do that, because everything in this world is imperfect. But in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 15, we see the answer. He says, "For this reason, Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, now that he has died as a ransom to set them free from sins committed under the first covenant." All of the things that we would like to accomplish on our own, the ability to be able to win our own salvation, the ability to do good enough to accomplish these things, even though they're impossible, and the old covenant proved that, the new covenant provides another answer, a better answer. Jesus Christ, the perfect sacrifice, came through the perfect avenue to present to us an opportunity to be restored to the Heavenly Father, to be able to commune and once again be together with God. Not not because of our goodness or our accomplishments, but because of Jesus Christ and his ability to be that opening for us, which we'll talk a little bit more about next week. But just to recap what we've just talked about, all of the old covenant did not come and go without purpose. It was here for a purpose, and it was here to show us that we cannot do it on our own. We need Jesus Christ. If you have a desire to have a relationship with God, if maybe there are things that have blocked you from being able to accomplish that, maybe even our own desires, I'd like to challenge you to think about if you are willing to follow Jesus Christ, if you are willing to submit to him and to do his will. If you would truly like to enjoy that fellowship with God, there's an easy way. It's very simple. God opened the door to be in fellowship with him through his Son, through his death, burial, and resurrection. God has offered us an invitation. That invitation is to accept the free gift of eternal life that Jesus brought. If you would like to know more about that, please give me a call. Let me know, and I would be glad to help you to find this answer of how we can once again be reunited with God and all of the promises that come with that. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a blessed week this week, and we'll look forward to following up with this next week and seeing a little bit more of God's promise and plan for us in this new covenant. Have a great day.